All right, from Jesse. Hello, speaker of truth in dark places and lord of the East Coast who went west. Big fan of your podcast and books. How do you reconcile your uncomfortableness with Lauren Southern's identity beliefs and your belief that European nations are not creedal, which I believe you explained as France is France because of the French, and if non-French replaced the French, it would no longer be France. I hope my question makes sense. It does make sense, but let me clarify it for anybody who didn't quite get it, because that was a long way around. Basically, I have said that you could make an argument in European countries that some of their culture is race-based. English is English because they were Angles, the French are the French because they were the Franks, the Germans are the Germans, and so on. And you could argue that these things grew up naturally out of culture and whatever more out of culture than of race, but you could argue that only the people who came from that culture could support that culture, whereas in America, we have written down our creed, so anybody can join the fun as long as they ascribe to the creed. And so we have no argument, we have no identitarian argument, as they now call it, which is just bigotry, another fancy word for bigotry, but all the same, we have no identitarian argument because we've written the creed down. Anybody can ascribe to it. Here's the thing, it's historical, right? Because after the fall of the Roman Empire, which is where some of their culture came from, and the German tribes did have a tradition of freedom and voting, and I think they used to vote twice, once drunk and once sober, to make sure they got the same results. I actually do think that's true. But, you know, the cultures grew up a little bit more like Topsy. It grew up naturally out of the earth, out of blood and soil, as they say. And so America was essentially a distillation of those cultures, especially British culture, put into words. They realized that a new age was beginning, a new country. How often in the world do civilized men get to form a new country and say, this is what this country is going to be like? That hadn't really, I can't think of another instance where that happened. It happened in America. It was really as if like history had a new birth, and they took what they had learned from England and Europe generally, and they put it into a creed. That changed the world, right? So that washed backwards, not only over Europe, but over the whole world. As I've said before, even the Russians, when they enslaved people, had to pretend they were a republic. They said they were the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, even though it was just a gigantic slave state. They had to pretend they were a federation like America because America had been so successful. And so it washed back into Europe, where now you will hear Europeans say, well, we're a multicultural country. I lived in England, and they were always saying, the prime minister was always saying, this is a multicultural country. And I'd look around and think, really? You know, it looks like a British country to me. It looks like a bunch of Englishmen running around to me. But it did wash back, and they said, yes, this American idea works so well. It is the leading idea in the world. We are the kind of empire of the world at this point. It has washed backwards. So they have to decide. It's not for us to decide. The European countries have to decide how they feel about this. Are they ready to establish that what they are now are creedal countries like us, or are they not? But it's something that they have to decide. So all I was pointing out was they can make the old argument that we are French because we are France because we're French, where we can't make that argument. So if they took my advice, they would establish their creed. The British used to laugh at me when I lived in England. They would laugh at me. Why do you have to have a written constitution? That's why. That's why, because we're a bunch of mutts. We come from all over the place. We like that we come from all over the place. We enjoy it. We enjoy our multicultural life together most of the time when we're not killing each other and when people aren't using it for identity politics. When we're left alone, we do have a successful melting pot. That's a good model. They could take up that model, but they have to take it up. You can't just sit around talking about who we are. That's not who we are. You have to know what you believe. We do. Do they? That's the question. So, you know, yeah, Lauren Southern can go over there and sell, you know, identitarian politics, or her friends can, but they have to decide for themselves if that's what they believe in.